Welcome to The Evidence-Based Marketer, a podcast focused on the science of marketing with a special emphasis on financial services. Whether you're looking to grow your business or provide a better client experience, we focus on how you can use data and research and time-tested strategies to be a more effective marketer.
A few years ago, there was a study of 185 venture capital pitches. Now, in a venture capital pitch, you're taking your idea to potential investors and trying to get them to back you. And you would think that the biggest predictor of whether or not your idea got funded was the quality of the idea. Was this something that could be a new line of business? Could it be profitable? Interestingly, that was not what actually caused an idea to be funded or not funded. And we're going to dig into that and a lot more in this first of our 2-episode series on persuasion. I'm William Chettle, Director of Experience and Engagement here at Symmetry Partners.
I'm Andrea Loyne, Digital Marketing Strategist here at Symmetry Partners. And today we're going to talk about body language and the art of persuasion. So, William, many people see persuasion as a manipulative art or a dark art. Why talk about persuasion at all?
It's a great question. And I think that as marketers, we are in the business of persuasion and we're doing it all day long. But ultimately, you have to believe in the solution that you're providing. And we work a lot with financial advisors. And what they're doing is important. If they can help more people actually put in place a financial plan, invest wisely, that's a good thing. And so if they can be more persuasive and help more people and convince more people to take the right steps, that is a very good thing. And in most businesses, you believe in what you're doing. And it's just a matter of, can you be more convincing? And of course, also, the principles we're going to talk about in persuasion also apply to your personal life. And whether it's convincing your spouse, partner, children to do something, or your colleagues, it's probably going to make you more effective and at least make sure the children go to bed on time. But no guarantees.
Anything I can do to help with that would be great. So what are the two most critical variables in how people are perceived?
Yeah, so when people first meet you, and this is just on first meeting, about 80% of the way that they judge you is based on just these two things, warmth and competence. And essentially that is warmth, what is this person's intentions towards me? And competence is how able are they to actually carry it out? And it's interesting that we would generally prefer to be regarded as competent, and we want other people to be warm towards us. Competence is regarded generally as it has a halo effect. It has an aura around it. So if I went to a good school, you might think I'm also good at golf. This is not necessarily true of warmth. If I do something nice, if I, help out somebody, help them cross the road, you're not going to think that I'm a warm and wonderful person. However, on the negative side, if I went to a good school and I'm a lousy golfer, you're not gonna think that I'm lousy at everything. But if you see me do something unkind, if you see me,
kick a
puppy, which would never do. If you see me kick a puppy, I'm done. You will never think I'm a good person. So I can suck at golf, and you'll not think I'm incompetent. Can't kick puppies. So general principles
in life to go by.
Yeah, and so I think one of the questions is, well, how do you actually use this to be more persuasive? And in terms of warmth, a lot of that is what we call immediacy cues. So this is smiling, using appropriate gestures and body language, being self-deprecating to some extent. And the other thing is making sure that your verbal and nonverbal presentation are aligned. It's very weird when people are actually saying one thing and their body is saying another thing. And so it's all kind of what you'd expect to be there. And in terms of how do you come across as more competent, well, a large amount of that is actually a function of confidence. So going back to that study of 185 venture capital pitches, again, it didn't really matter so much whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. What determined predominantly whether the idea got funded was how confident was the presenter. And so it's really important in general, personally and professionally as marketers, to be confident, believe in what you're doing, because we are going to perceive that as competence.
That makes sense. So you want to build a rapport. So Joe Navarro is a former FBI agent, counterintelligence. He was part of counterterrorism. And he said that there's an implicit message that you want to give, and that's what you are experiencing right now is important to me, and I'm going to meet you where you are emotionally so that you know I am one with you in thought and sentiment. So what are things that advisors can do when they're meeting with their clients and their prospects and really anybody to build rapport with them?
Yeah, this is actually the secret to small talk. And rapport is certainly important if you're interrogating a suspect, but it's important in any consideration or circumstance. And really, a lot of it is about what Joe Navarro calls agree and add. I mean, it's amazing, but the secret of small talk is this simple: agree and add. And so what that means is, for example, Andrea, if I say it's a nice day today, you add to that.
It is a nice day, and this weekend is supposed to be just as nice.
You see what she did there? She agreed with me. She validated that it was a nice day, and then she added on to that. So, and this can be anything. It could be, how about the local sports team? Yes, I love the local sports team, and I'm very excited about their prospects for next season. You are just recognizing what the person said and then adding a little extra. And ideally, they will then take that process. They will recognize what you added. They will agree with it and then add to that. And if you're doing it well and you have a rapport, it will build on itself and you're soon having a great conversation.
Makes sense.
Now, of course, sometimes people are going to say things that you don't agree with, and that they might say the weather's lovely and you think it's far too hot, and that's okay. That's okay. So, in that circumstance, if you disagree, it's you sort of agree, add, and affirm. So, if someone says the weather is hot, you say, well, if they say it's a nice day, you say, well, it's a little too hot for me. But I can certainly see that for a lot of people, it would be a perfect temperature, but just not for me. And then you add and say, but I'm excited about the weekend. The weather looks great.
Yep. Cooled down just a little bit.
So even physical comfort is important. There's studies that have shown that if you put people in an uncomfortable chair, they drive a harder bargain when negotiating. In fact, we're going to do at some point a whole series on the science of all the five senses, and touch is certainly one of those. People actually, if they're too hot, get a little bit harder in their bargaining. So in any circumstance, if you can control it, make sure that the person that you're negotiating with is in a comfortable chair.
It's small little things like that can really change things. I know when I'm hot, I get cranky, so I'm really not going to be in the mood to bargain. And then there's the power poses, right? There's ways that you can.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's this whole. We're going to I think it's a great time now to segue into body language. And, a few years ago, Amy Cuddy, a professor at Harvard, she's since left, came out with power poses that if you took these big power poses, stood up, used broad, expansive gestures, you were likely to be more confident. Your stress levels went down. It was all great. Turned out there were some problems with the research. So, as far as we can tell right now, the whole science of power poses is not fully discredited, but not fully creditable. But there are, a lot of myths about body language. And what's interesting is that a lot of the things that you traditionally associate with body language, like, if you cross your arms, that the person's not listening to me or they're resisting me, isn't true.
Well, yeah, there are, common body language cues and poses, and some of them can come across both positively and negatively. Are there some that you find out there that are more predominant than others and that have both, positive and negative?
Well, sure. And I think the key thing with body language is to look at changes, because it can be, there are some things that are close to universal, and we'll talk about those in a sec. But what's really important is the person doing something different? So if you're having a stressful conversation with someone and they touch their ear, if they do it once, well, maybe just their ear was itchy. But if you notice that they do this whenever things get stressful, that's an indication of how they deal with stress, or that something is making them uncomfortable. So you really need to read the changes. And over time, you can understand, I had a boss that whenever we had an uncomfortable conversation, his leg would start twitching. So you knew the moment that leg was twitching that he was not comfortable. And it was an easy read. And of course, gamblers are amazing at this, because they understand what are called tells. And they look for those tells in the people that they're gambling with. And if you're a good gambler, you work super hard to minimize tells. those
that
tells.
poker face that you put on your poker face.
Exactly. And you wear dark glasses and you do everything you can so that people can't read it. But if you're good, I mean, it's really hard to read these tells. And if you're good, you can kind of get a sense over time by studying your gambling opponent. Okay, when they do this, it means that they have a bad hand. When they do this, it means they have a good hand. And again, it's going to be unique to the individual. I might twitch my leg, somebody else might touch their ear, etc. And again, with body language, we think that, for example, that we can tell liars easily. It's really hard to tell liars. In fact, people are basically no better than chance in detecting whether somebody is lying or not. And the cues that you think, like, looking down, looking away, etc., or hemming and hawing, not so great. Now, there's a whole science of actually how you can detect liars. Liars tend to do things like tell more elaborate stories. They tend to be sometimes super detailed and then not detailed enough. And if you ask people just very detailed questions, after a while, it's going to be harder for a liar to keep up. Could you help me out? Tell me about where you were at 12 o'clock on Tuesday, and you keep drilling down and drilling down. That makes it very stressful and difficult for the liar. But in general, we're very, very bad at detecting lies. But there are a few things that you can tell from body language. And again, this is not going to apply to 100% of people, but these are things that you can use to determine whether a conversation is going well, whether a person is stressed out, whether they're listening to you, whether they're receptive. And of course, you have the opportunity to also mimic some of this and create that better kind of feedback loop.
And you can also make sure, if you're paying attention, you can pivot the conversation. If they're uncomfortable, find a way to move beyond it.
Exactly. So a key thing is the whole idea of what's called ventral fronting and ventral denial. and essentially your ventral cavity is where all the critical organs are, your heart, your lungs, etc. And so people tend to be understandably protective of this. And when people turn fully towards you, like we are right now, we're facing each other, that's a good sign. I'm ventral fronting. I'm comfortable. I believe you're not going to reach out and rip my heart out.
It's always a good thing.
Yes, especially in a co-host. But if I turn away from you, I may maybe still be looking at you, but I'm ventrally denying you, turning my core away from you. That may mean I'm feeling uncomfortable. And it's interesting. Look at a party when somebody comes in and walks over to a group. Do people turn towards this person and turn their whole body towards this person or not? And there's also a saying, the feet don't lie. And a foot pointed away from you, especially if you're in a one-on-one conversation. Now, obviously, in a group, people's feet kind of have to point everywhere. But if you are in a one-on-one conversation and people's feet are pointed away from you, that it's basically a sign saying they'd like to run away, that they're not
on the go.
They're on their go. They're not comfortable. Now, crossed legs, especially when standing, are a great sign, because if your legs are crossed, it's that much harder to run away from you. And so when people cross their legs and, in a conversation, et cetera, that means that they are super comfortable. So feet don't lie. Look at the feet and see where they're indicating. The other thing to think about is, there's some other body cues. And again, these are super, super generalizations, but they are indicative. Again, going back to what's the most important thing, understand what the context is.
Yeah.
So the first one is just squinted eyes. Now, if you're having a great conversation about the weather and people are squinting their eyes, it probably doesn't mean anything. But squinted eyes can mean I don't like what's going on, something doesn't feel right, I disagree with what you're saying. Interestingly enough, one of the things that the one body gesture we cannot actually fake is a genuine smile. Genuine smiles are impossible to fake because it's just the involuntary movement of the actual smiles, the full muscles that are engaged in a genuine smile. But also another thing we can control is the dilation of our pupils. When they get wider, that generally means we're excited or happy. And when they narrow, that means that we're concerned potentially, or it's super bright outside. But this is one of the reasons, again, that the gamblers wear those dark glasses so that you cannot actually look at the dilation of their pupils.
So if you're looking at someone with squinted eyes, and say you're a financial professional sitting in your intro meeting with them, and they're consistently squinting their eyes, is there any way to change that, or maybe just move on to another topic?
Well, this is the key thing about persuasion and body language is, read the room, read the body. And so if someone is uncomfortable about something and they're squinting their eyes and they're doing it repeatedly, especially in areas that you think might be concerning, like, you're talking about their savings or their investments in the financial context, it's a great opportunity to sort of step back and say, I'm getting the sense that maybe something about this is making you uncomfortable. Would you mind sharing?
And see, that was going to be my next question: is should you call it out, or should you just move on beyond it?
And a lot of it depends on the context, right? If you're at a cocktail party and someone's squinting at you, you probably, you might want to just change the topic, right?
Yeah.
It's making them uncomfortable, or go get some more chips and dip. But in relationships, in business, if this is you're meeting with a client, this may be something that you need to at least address. And that's just going to be, you're going to have to understand whether this is something that you need to focus in on, understand, bring out, or whether you can just move past it. And sometimes you can adjust on the fly. If you find some particular topic is making them uncomfortable, maybe you don't have to understand why it is, you just change the topic. But if for example, in the financial situation, you need to understand the assets a person has. You need to understand how they're invested. You need to understand their sort of history of investing. And so if it may be making them uncomfortable, but empathize.
I think that goes back to as well, like we've talked in previous episodes about, trusting the financial advisor and how that profession isn't necessarily the most trustworthy in the eyes of, the world, but that helps to build the trust too. It shows that you're understanding them and their situations.
And just, one of the things is to validate, like saying, I understand this is a topic that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And it's natural because this is, it concerns money, which is a very emotionally charged topic for a lot of people. But what I'm trying to do here in this case is understand your situation so that I can actually help you feel more comfortable with your money and more comfortable in your financial future.
And all of this just from their body language. That's great.
But again, you got to read it and then if they say no, I'm good. Maybe they just like squinting their eyes.
Maybe it's right.
So some other things, touching the neck. Now, the neck is super vulnerable. This is, when people are attacked by lions and tigers and bears, they often go right for the neck. I mean, and so when people touch the neck, it's often a sign of, I'm struggling with something. I'm stressed by what you're saying. I'm concerned, and sometimes you'll find, particularly with women, that they'll use what's called a venting motion, which is especially if the long hair, they'll sort of touch it and kind of try to vent the heat. That it shows that they're feeling uncomfortable.
I do that quite often.
That's why you got your hair up.
That's why I always have my hair up.
And so that is something, again, to be concerned about. Rubbing the chest, again, I don't feel confident. I'm troubled by something. I'm very worried. Because again, this is your hand is over your heart. Mm-hmm. Something is concerning you. It's that whole idea of the ventral cavity and protecting our ventral cavity, protecting our neck. And a lot of body language is about protecting these parts of our bodies that are actually physically vulnerable.
That's true.
Now, some positive ones, right? We've talked about some of the negative signs but arched eyebrows. So if people arch eyebrows, especially when they first see you, I'm happy to see you. I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised. That's intriguing. So that is a great sign. And so, and read that in a personal context. It means I'm interested in you. Okay. For everybody who's dating.
Look for the arched eyebrows.
Also, a really good sign, going back to feet, if you're dating, I read this the other day, is if particularly the woman is wearing like strappy sandals or strappy shoes and is dangling them off her foot.
Oh.
Because that means she definitely can't run away.
She needs her shoes.
She needs her shoes. Another very positive thing is a tilted head. So if your head is tilted to one side or the other, I'm interested in what's going on. I'm listening. I agree with what you're saying. So that is something, again, to focus in on. But you have to be attentive. You have to, conversation is an art, and persuasion is an art. And, kind of just to wrap up on body language. Now, it's not controversial because these things exist. Mirror neurons, they found them in monkeys, they found them in humans. And what basically they do is they, if I see you, Andrea, if I see you, climbing a ladder, well, in my head, in the mirror neurons, I climb the ladder too. And so this creates the potential, and you're going to see a lot of bad science around here, but it creates the potential to create this positive feedback loop by kind of mimicking body language, mimicking gestures, mimicking tone. I mean, in general, the more that you can kind of give people positive feedback, mimic what they're doing, not in a sort of copycat way, but at least so that it feels like it's sympathetic. If they cross their legs, maybe you cross their legs, use the same language. And so that's kind of a natural segue into our next episode, which is going to be all about how you can use 8 principles of persuasion to be more persuasive. So you've learned about body language and reading the room and some of the things that you can do in order to, either understand where a conversation is going or actually create a better conversation and build rapport. And now we're going to teach you how to actually use other principles of persuasion, 8 principles of persuasion, to be even more persuasive.
Thank you all for joining us today. This has been another episode of The Evidence-Based Marketer. You can find this episode and other episodes on our YouTube channel or at theevidencebasedmarketer.com.
Symmetry Partners, LLC is an investment advisory firm registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The firm only transacts business in states where it is properly registered, excluded or exempted from registration requirements. No one should assume that future performance of any specific investment strategy, product, or non-investment related content made reference to directly or indirectly in this material will be profitable. As with any investment strategy, there is the possibility of profitability as well as loss. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions and/or applicable laws, the content may not be reflective of current opinions or positions. Please note the material is provided for educational and background use only. Moreover, you should not assume that any discussion or information contained in this material serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice.
Please note that nothing either stated or implied on this podcast is intended to be compliance or legal advice regarding your marketing program.